Hello, everyone. This is me, Amir Ahmed Nasr, the host and the curator of the Future of Islam in the Age of New Media. And today I have with me a very special guest. His name is Nidhal Guessoum, and Professor Nidhal is actually based in the American University of Sharjah in the UAE, and he's an astrophysicist. He's very science-oriented, and he's also spent time working as a researcher at NASA. So he's somebody who's really involved in the scientific world. He's done a lot of amazing work. And, more relevantly for our discussion, he's also written a lot about Islam and science and how we can reconcile the two. And I find his opinions extremely fascinating and very intriguing and also very unique and original. And also, he's written some reviews about the event, the audio seminar that, you've been following. And he's had some very, very interesting thoughts that I need to be shared. So while he was not a speaker during the 1660 audio seminar, I wish I knew about him back then. I would have definitely included him. So while he wasn't a speaker, I am inviting him right now because I think his opinions are extremely relevant to our discussion, and I think will make it really rich. So Professor Nidhal, welcome.
Thank you very much, Amir. It's truly a pleasure for me and very flattering to be included among your guests and among your project, which, as you know and you have read my reviews, I thought was very original, very interesting, useful, and I'm very happy to be contributing this little bit from my side, and wish you the greatest success with the whole thing.
No, thank you very much, and I appreciate that you made the time for this. I know you're in your office now, you got classes and probably a million things to do. But let's start very quickly, and let's save the best things for last. So let's start with the critiques. Based on the reviews and the articles that you've written about the subject of the internet's influence on, contemporary Islamic thought and just in general the younger generation and knowledge consumption, you do have some concerns about, the internet, and you do see some negative aspects, and you have critiqued them. Can you share some of those insights with us and what you think?
Well, we can begin by critiquing your own work or your own project.
Let's do that.
My one or two critiques that I had formulated then when I had written about it, although for the most part, as I have just said, I thought it was a fascinating and very positive project. First thing is, the soundbite thing, the soundbite format, the 1 minute format. You yourself sort of contributed to whatever the internet pushes us to do, which is quick and do something very short. And even the videos nowadays have to be YouTube 4 minutes long, no more. A long lecture is nobody's going to watch. So I thought, although of course most of your speakers, if not all of them, were extremely enlightening and were able to compact very, very interesting and insightful ideas in 1 minute. But when you have a large bunch of 1 minute, 1 minute bites, even if they are all very interesting, after a while it starts to completely turn into a big mush. You lose track of who said what and what are the ideas, and you find yourself having to take notes, which now is back sort of to the old technology of take a pen and a paper and write down or type, and you can't watch and type at the same time. So the format itself, I thought, was a bit defeating to the purpose of trying to explore. You cannot explore in 1 minute format. But you've noticed that, and now you've come back with much longer interviews, extended explorations, and that is all great. Now, the other, not critique, but the other remark I had formulated was that most of your guests had said, the internet and the new media have democratized and flattened the field, sort of a playing field, and now everybody can have access to information, and everybody can find out, the lonely voices that were kept out of the, mainstream discourse and so on, and all of that is true, of course. But first of all, we have to remember that in order to have access to that to begin with, you have to be digitally literate. And how much of the ummah today is really digitally literate in order to really get access to that information which is out there, but how many are able to get to that. Number two, how much of it is available in the local language? For example, for me, it would be Arabic. For other people, it would be Urdu. For others, it would be Farsi, etc. We tend to think that English or some of the Western languages are accessible to everybody, and they are not for the most part. Number three, and this is a critique, this is something that worries me very much. On the internet, the internet is not really democratic. The internet depends very much on the resources that you have. As you know very well, Amir, it's not enough to have a very good idea or even a very good website and put that stuff online.
You need to market it. You need to have a lot of traffic, a lot of readers.
Money. You have to have people who disseminate all of this. And in the end, the people who are, the more orthodox, the more status quo people tend to be the ones who have the resources, the money, and they now produce so much stuff, even we'll get to that a little bit later, on the science front, that is really hindering the progress instead of helping the progress. They're using the new technology to stop the positive effect of the new technology, and that is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, and in my opinion, a perfect example of a very large websites with resources and a huge audience is, for instance, IslamOnline.net, I believe. I haven't seen it in a long time. Very orthodox. It's, reportedly, Yusuf al-Qaradawi, he's involved in it and behind the scenes. So I agree with you, definitely. The internet has flattened the field in terms of providing access and anyone having an opinion being able to publish the opinion. But publishing the opinion and the ideas is just the first step. You have to market the ideas, you have to get a big audience, you have to win over the audience.
Another example, Amir. Another example. What I was more thinking of in terms of the science and the Islam science or science religion discourse is Harun Yahya. The creationist literature. Now, Harun Yahya is not only dangerous because of the creationist and really anti-scientific discourse that he carries, but because he has so many resources, he can produce all of that in 20, 30 languages. And he can do it in multiple formats. He will mail books to you. He will send things to libraries. He can produce videos. He can produce documentaries. He can produce CDs. He can flood you with all kinds of information in many, many languages, which look really modern and well-produced and are therefore very influential and very impactful on the new generation, which is completely sold to the digital lifestyle today and the digital format of education. And that is extremely dangerous, you see, because then people think that, oh, this is the modern stuff, and they just digest it completely. And we, with our lone voices, trying to produce something really solid, really positive, really worthwhile, are completely drowned out.
No, completely agree. But let's backtrack a few steps a little bit before getting ahead of ourselves. So we've talked about the critiques, and I think we both agree on that point. But let's move on to the positive stuff and try to see the bigger picture. We have discussed before the starting to record the interview that the internet has liberalized and has opened up the discourse on Islam. In the past, it was a very closed-up discourse amongst Islamists, and in many ways, in my humble opinion, it's very medieval, very closed-up, very suffocating, and very controlled. There's a lot of hegemony. The internet has opened up a lot of that. Now, certainly, even though it has opened up, as you've mentioned, and I agree with you that it's open, but it doesn't mean all websites have the same number of traffic, have the same amount of readers. There are things that are just very disproportionate. And it doesn't mean that the best ideas are the ones that spread. Now, in terms of good ideas, negative ideas, you're a scientist, you're an astrophysicist, you're someone who's very well respected in your field, you've spent time at NASA. I mean, you know this stuff through and through, and you've written quite a lot about it, and and even in academic journals. Let's talk more about this whole science issue within the Muslim world. We agree that the internet has opened up Islam. There's a more open intellectual atmosphere on the internet, in cyberspace. You can say things that probably you cannot even say in your own universities. So that's all good. In your opinion, what is scientific? what are the criteria for something to be scientific? You know, you just talked about Harun Yahya. I know a lot of people who love Harun Yahya. They think he's a brilliant genius. He represents real science. I completely disagree with that. I think he's spreading pseudoscience, and you know, the viewers can forgive my language, but I think it's garbage in most cases. So what can we do to fix that? And why is yours called science? Why isn't his work scientific?
Um, First of all, science has a whole methodology. Science is not a bunch of facts. It's not a bunch of results, and it's certainly not a bunch of opinions. You see, one of the big misconceptions is people will say if you present them with certain ideas, we'll get to evolution a little bit later, or cosmology, or environmental issues, or whatever. They say, okay, so that's your idea, and I respect it, but I disagree. Or they will say, oh, I really don't believe in that. So you believe in the in evolution of humans or evolution of life, or you believe in the Big Bang, I'm not sure. Or they don't know where science is to be found, how science is to be established, how is it to be confirmed, and it is this whole methodology of science that is, for the most part, missing. Now, to put it simply, science is something that you can prove. It is not something that you can just state or you can express or you can believe in. Even the word believe has no place in science. It's not that we do not believe in God, or we don't believe in spirit, or we don't believe in religion. Believing in a fact, believing in the Big Bang. Students ask me this all the time. So, sir, do you believe in the existence of extraterrestrials? And I say it's not what I believe. It is what I can get, what I can prove, or what I can establish. What is the evidence for whatever I'm going to tell you? And I want you from now on to always ask me, what is the evidence for what you are saying? Mm-hmm. How do scientists know that this is true? How can we say, without having even been close to the sun, let alone being inside it, that the temperature at the very center of the sun is 15.5 million degrees? It's not 16, it's not 20, it's not 10,000, it's not somebody made up a number or came up with a proposition. We know because we have certain calculations, certain measurements, certain checks, and most importantly, because it is completely objective, meaning that it is completely disconnected from whoever is doing the science. So I will do the calculation, and I must get the same result as anybody in Japan or Zimbabwe or Iran or Scotland. Mm-hmm. And somebody who does the measurement, makes an experiment, needs to get the same result as anybody else. And if there is any disconnect or any disagreement between them, that calculation or that result is not established until everybody has repeated it and shown it to be uniform and correct, and we all agree that it is it. This is the result. Okay. So there is a methodology to it, and that is what science is about. Now, things that are not scientifically methodical. My father is a philosopher. I usually, sometimes laughingly refer to myself as an amateur philosopher. I like philosophy, I like theology, I like psychology. In fact, when I entered the university, I wanted to minor in psychology. Okay, just to tell you that I am more diverse. But the methods are not the same, and we cannot assign the same level of credential and the same level of establishing facts. Nobody will come in philosophy and say this is a fact of philosophy. These are theories, these are ideas, these are viewpoints, these are schools of thought. But in science, the level of establishing an idea is much, much more rigorous and much, much more solid. And that's what makes science so unique. Now, to anticipate your questions or the relevance of all this, this is what makes science something that cannot be ignored. We cannot just go around it or, make up our own worldview or our own theology in disconnect from what science is telling us. You can leave out Marxism, you can leave out existentialism, and you can be a Muslim all you want and ignore existentialism all completely if you like. You can ignore Marxism if you like. You can ignore all kinds of philosophies or all kinds of worldviews, materialism or whatever. But you cannot ignore science. You have no right, or else you will be schizophrenic. You will be, one day you accept certain things because everybody accepts the smartphone, for example. Everybody accepts the laptop. Mm-hmm. Everybody accepts satellite TV. So you're accepting science without declaring it at home with your own devices. But when it tells you something about life, about the evolution of the cosmos, about the environment, about the atmosphere of Earth, about pollution, etc., then you start to say, oh, that's an opinion. There are different ways of looking at it.
Right. Well, I think nobody would say that I'm not rational and I would prefer to be irrational and I would prefer to be unscientific. I think everybody would like to be rational. Everybody would like to be scientific. In fact, the most religious of the religious people, they use the authority of science, whether correctly or incorrectly, to try to back up their points. So nobody will shy away and say, oh no, I don't want to be scientific. I think everybody wants to be scientific. But I guess Muslims, many of them, they gravitate towards the works of folks like Harun Yahya because it provides some kind of reconciliation, even if it may be a false and incorrect reconciliation. And they have difficulty accepting evolution as discussed by Western mainstream scientists, and even, for instance, someone like Richard Dawkins, whose tone is very aggressive, very anti-theist, not just atheist. They see that and they say, if this is what evolution is, then I cannot accept it because it contradicts my worldview, and it's a difficult position to be in. People want to be loyal to their faith, they want to honor their faith and their tradition, but they want to be scientific, and Harun Yahya provides that kind of reconciliation, even though it's falls in many ways, as we've said. What is your reconciliation? Why is yours more scientifically accurate? And based on the methodology of science as you've described it, and how does it also make room for God? How have you managed to reconcile that?
Yeah, there are several issues there. First of all, as you just pointed out at the end, we need to make sure that whatever reconciliation we adopt is fully consistent with, as I said, with the knowledge, whatever is established knowledge, mainly primarily science. But not just science, by the way. I mean, I should, just to be fair, because some people might criticize and say, but there are certain other fields, let's say, for example, in economics or in media, in sociology, you do surveys, etc., and you conclude certain things that are clearly correct. So it's not just science, but whatever is methodologically rigorous, and science is the paramount example of science, of methodologically rigorous knowledge establishment. But certain other fields can also achieve some of that, but not always. Now, Harun Yahya, unfortunately, provides you with an escape. Doesn't provide you with a reconciliation. It doesn't say, okay, we're going to take all of this and we're going to take what we have learned and our tradition, etc., and we're going to put it together coherently. What he says is, I'm going to show you how to defeat the other side. And I'm going to show you that the other side is wrong, so you don't have to deal with it. So anybody who tells you something about evolution, then you just say, oh, there are certain missing links. Oh, there is some issue with whatever experiment or measurement or natural selection or this or that, or they will bring some example and say, see, evolution cannot explain this, so therefore evolution is wrong. Well, just because evolution cannot explain everything does not mean that what it has explained is not correct. Or just because there are certain things that Mr. Harun Yahya and his group, because Harun Yahya himself, people should know, is not a scientist and has never read or written anything about the biology or evolution or anything about science, but he has a large group working with him. None of them can understand or seem to be willing to understand the science. Just because they don't understand it does not mean that it is wrong. You need to make the effort, you need to go study it open-mindedly, and then in the end we can discuss. And mostly, bring me a collection of people from around the world with diverse backgrounds and see if they can find a consensus or on something or against it. Whatever fact or whatever knowledge is there is not going to be rejected by the majority or by all well-meaning scientists. So if you find 2, 3, even 10 or 20 scientists who are unwilling to accept this or that, does not make the theory or the result incorrect. So they need to really do their homework more properly, do the science more properly. So that route is a dead end because it does not provide for any reconciliation. Now, my approach to reconciliation is really, first of all, as I said, is to make sure that the science is correct. Whatever we take on board needs to be fully filtered and fully correct. Secondly, we need to distinguish between what is scientific and what is metaphysical. By metaphysical, I mean whatever interpretations or whatever worldviews are added. And here, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, and everybody from the New Atheist School are making, in fact, the same mistake that they accuse the overly religious people of making, meaning that they tend to take their science as equal to the worldview or equal to the philosophy that they adopt. Now, there's a difference between what science tells you and how you construct your worldview, or how you interpret it, or how you understand your existence and any other dimensions of life, be it spiritual, psychological, moral, or philosophical, or religious, or whatever. So Richard Dawkins makes the mistake of believing that science equals all the philosophical, all the religious, or pseudo-religious, all the consequences that he draws, he thinks are to be taken from science. What we say is the interpretation, the worldview that you can construct is up to you to bring, up to you to make. It is cultural, it is sociological, it is historical, it is religious, what have you. It has to be grounded in the science. Whatever I believe cannot violate the science, but what I construct around the science, as long as my science is correct, is completely personal and is up to me. Now, in the end, if I choose to be theistic with my science, nobody can attack me because I have not rejected or violated anything that is of established knowledge, scientific or otherwise. But at the same time, why do I make that choice? Some people say, but there is the science and that is enough. So the materialists say, I take what science gives me and nothing more. Why do you have to add more? Because I look at life more broadly. I look at my existence. I look at my history. I look at my culture. And it is completely a choice to be made. Do I believe that by making this theistic choice, I construct a greater worldview, a more meaningful worldview for myself? And the answer for me and for Muslims is yes. And that is why we do not think that the materialistic, purely or limited to the science worldview is enough. Now, those who want to make that choice and cannot see anything else to be added are free to do it. And we cannot attack them, or we cannot say, you are wrong, how can you not include spirit, God, afterlife into your worldview? But they, in turn, cannot tell us that we are not free to construct a larger worldview that is meaningful to us, as long as we do not violate anything that the common denominator agrees upon.
Wow, this is excellent stuff. I'm sure we can go on and get into a lot of details, but I don't want the interview to be way too long and extended. I think it goes back to your critique earlier of how in the internet age we want everything to be as short and as concise as possible. But I bet that some people watching this are very curious to learn more. What books would you recommend that you have written, and that you're featured in, like Atoms in Eden? Or other books by other people? What would you recommend for people to read to learn more about this issue, to really be more grounded in rigorous science, and to also help them reconcile, their faith with science, and honor science, and also honor their tradition?
Well, as we usually do, we plug our own books or our own work, right? So allow me to refer, in addition to that interview, Atoms and Eden is a wonderful collection of interviews by Steve Paulson. Fantastic, and has, I think, about 19 or 20 people of diverse, from the atheists to the really strongly religious people of diverse traditions and diverse scientific fields. But there is also my book, which has now been out for about a year or so, Islam's Quantum Question, has a slightly strange title, but the subtitle will explain what the book is about. It says, Reconciling Muslim Tradition and Modern Science. So it is exactly what we've been talking about. And in fact, the first half of the book talks about this, what is science and what is Islam, and how do people connect them? What are the erroneous ideas that have been produced in this form? For example, not just Harun Yahya, there is this whole i'jaz discourse, the science in the Quran, the miraculous content in the Quran, and there's a long chapter on that in my book. But then the second half of the book takes these specific fields of cosmology, biological evolution, human evolution, etc., and tries to present to people specifically, very clearly for Muslims. I was talking to my generation. My book is dedicated, by the way, to my two sons who are 19 and 17 and their generation. So I really feel that there is now a generation waiting for people to show them ideas, to show them ways of connecting all of this. We cannot leave out modernity. We cannot get rid of modernity. We cannot go back to the old traditions and ignore what has happened for the past several centuries. This is just not an option. But at the same time, a large majority of the Muslims don't want to abandon their tradition. They feel their tradition. They live their tradition. But they want to find a way that is reasonable, makes some sense, does not discard this or that. And in my book, that's exactly what I do. So I try to show reconciliation. I give some general ideas, or with lots of stories. I mean, it's not a philosophical book. It's really almost autobiographical. It tells you all kinds of anecdotes and stories, and how I met X, and how I read this book, and what I thought about this, and then my experience. And like you also, I mean, I was at first seduced, 20, 25 years ago, I was seduced by this, miraculous scientific content in the Quran, and I was very fond of those books. And then until I started to notice that there are some scientific errors in them, and then philosophically didn't add up, and then these people don't know what they're talking about, and this and that. And then I felt like, oh, wait a minute, I need to reconstruct this whole thing. I need to for myself, I mean, I need to, otherwise I'll either be schizophrenic, or I'll be compromising certain science or certain religious ideas. And my whole philosophy started to redevelop. So I really encourage people to seek out that book and find it. It's available through all online publishers and in local bookstores in the West, and even in Malaysia and places like that. It can be found in Turkey and so on. An Arabic, there's a French version to it for those who know French. An Arabic version is in the works. But I also want, because it is new media, and because it is, the new generation, and to be in sync with your own project, to refer to some of my blogging. I write a weekly blog on Irtiqas, the science and religion news blog. People should find that. I write about once a month on the Huffington Post on science and religion issues, more specifically science and Islam. So people can just Google me and search a little bit. Don't stop at the first or second. Seek out my own website. There's loads of links over there for some of my writings and some of the other material. There is a lot to be found, and for this I'm very grateful for the internet, the new social media, and projects like yours.
No, wonderful. I'll be sure to look up all of these resources and place links under this video, so that the viewers watching right now, if you look under this video, the links will already be there. Professor Nidhal, thank you very much. This has been really wonderful and very, very insightful.
I'm grateful to you, Amir, and the best of luck, and looking forward to all your intellectual production, which I'm sure is going to be extremely useful for everyone.
Thank you.